a very high percent of human beings unfortunately go through life in defense mode. They're just waiting to see what comes at them. They're reacting. And when they're at a job, they're doing as little as humanly possible to not get fired and to get paid next Friday.
Is your business boring? Or do you have like a business idea that maybe is not very sexy, but you really think it could make you tons of money or be really successful? Look, you are going to love today's episode. I am Shawn D. Nelson, host of the Let Me Save You 25 Years podcast, that Lovesack guy. I'm building, something trying to grow to 1 billion, but there are thousands, maybe millions of other businesses that might even be better for you, better for the world, easier to execute. Today's topic, Shake Every Tree, stems back to some of the early days of Lovesack, after we'd gotten through the bootstrap phase where I had to have cash to grow. And I had to go through the somewhat humiliating process of asking everyone I knew or could network to for money. And it really is an art unto itself. It is a necessary business skill for many. And it can be really difficult and humiliating. In some ways, it was probably the hardest thing I ever did in business. And it came back multiple times, like even 20 years in, just before our IPO, I found myself having to shake every tree again, trying to bridge finance my way to an IPO that I knew was going to be amazing. But oh my gosh, here I was, 2 decades in at 70 million, not 7, still having to raise money, still having to survive, still having to run out there and shake every tree. We talk about how to do that. We talk about the mentality necessary. We talk about how to avoid it. You're going to love this conversation with Nick because he's going to give you a recipe to avoid having to shake every tree and bootstrap your way by picking maybe a more boring path, but a path that can lead you to millions, and his recipe for doing so. And he gives really specific advice on how to handle uncertainty and adversity in all aspects of life. And really a lot of the misconceptions in entrepreneurship and business, and why Nick's brand new book called The Sweaty Startup is going to shake up entrepreneurship. And you are on the bleeding edge of it with this podcast right here, right now. You're going to love it. Today's guest is proof that you don't have to build the next flashy app or wear a hoodie in Silicon Valley to become wildly successful. In fact, he's built a business empire by embracing what most people overlook, the boring stuff. He's the founder of Storage Squad, a real estate mogul, and the author behind the brand new book, The Sweaty Startup, where he shares some brutally honest, wildly practical business advice to hundreds of thousands of fans who now know that boring often means profitable. But this man isn't just building buildings, he's building people and relationships, investor networks, and a brand that challenges how we think about entrepreneurship. He embodies this Shawnism, shake every tree, constantly creating momentum by reaching out, staying curious, and taking action where others hesitate. Whether you're in a dorm room, a boardroom, or just trying to figure out your next move, get ready to take notes because we have the one and only Nick Huber.
Shawn, thanks for having me.
Heck yeah, man. Good to meet you in person, hang out with you on the pod. I'm really excited about this conversation. I'm really jealous. I sometimes talk about how, like, I'll be at like business networking events or something, or I'll hear some other business story, or I'll read your bio, and I'll feel so much jealousy because everyone's path seems so much easier than mine. Like, why didn't I do that? Why didn't I do all these, as you say, boring businesses that make tons of money instead of trying to like swing for the fence with what I'm doing? And we'll get into it. But when you heard the topic for this week, shake every tree, without thinking too hard, what came to mind for you?
Well, first of all, it wasn't an easy journey, my journey. And I think any business owner who tells you that it was is full of it personally. Like this game that we play, like it looks fancy, it looks flashy from the outside. We can talk about multiple businesses, holding companies are all sexy right now, but business will humble you. It's hard. People are hard. The problems are complex. So my journey is unique, but the shake every tree thing reminded me of when I was in the early days prowling and hunting for talent. Um,
Hmm.
so I was bootstrapping a sweaty startup. I didn't want investors. I didn't want to give away equity, so I wasn't necessarily hunting for money. Although I did spend a big chunk of my time doing that for real estate, which is the most capital intensive business in the world. But I was looking for talent, and it takes me back to when I hear "Shake Every Trees." It takes me back to a Walmart parking lot in 2013. I was sitting there. It was like 8 p.m. in Ithaca, New York. It was wintertime. It was cold. It was snowy. It was nasty in upstate New York in the wintertime. My fiance, or my girlfriend, now wife, was inside of Walmart running a couple errands. I was answering customer service calls, like emails, in the car. Um, and I see this out of the corner of my eye. I just see this person like run across the parking lot. And I'm like, whoa, what's that? And I look up, and it's a person in a Walmart vest, and they're running through the Walmart parking lot. And I'm like, wow, I've never seen that. Anybody that I've ever seen at Walmart is kind of walking in slow motion. You know, they're getting paid by the hour. They don't own Walmart. Why would they move quickly? And he's running around picking up carts. He's like putting the carts together, pushing the carts together, like moving very quickly. A couple minutes later, he's like pushing a line of 30 carts. You know how it is, like really leaning back, pushing these carts rolling through the parking lot, and a bag, like a Walmart sack, is tumbleweeding through, and he like reaches down with his right hand and swipes it and puts it in his back pocket, and he's hustling into Walmart. I'm like, okay, this is unique. I got to talk to this person. I always keep business cards in my back pocket. So I make sure I get out of the car. I make sure our paths cross on the way into Walmart. And I'm like, hey, man, like, what are you doing? Why are you going so fast? And he goes, well, my manager is in the back doing something. The cart team called in sick. They're not here. And the basketball game gets out. The high school varsity basketball game will be over in about 20 minutes. And we're going to get a rush. We're going to get like 20, 30 families who come in here to grocery shop. We got no carts. Like, this is a major problem. So I'm doing what I got to do. Like, I'm not even supposed to be here. I'm over in produce, but like, I'm out here getting carts. And like, instantly in my head as a business owner, I'm like thinking, okay, this person's a little bit different. And so I pull out my card and I say, well, I own a company in town. It's called Storage Squad. We do moving and storage. It's a fun job. We pay $20 an hour. If you know anybody like you who was looking for a job, if you have any friends, have them send me an email. And obviously I was looking for him, not necessarily who he was, you know, his friends, but he sent me an email later that night. We had a conversation. The next day I hired him about a week later, and he was one of the best employees I ever found. So just kind of,
Wow.
that's where it takes me.
That's so good. That's so good. I love that you took this shake every tree to seeking people. You know, when I conceived of this little Shawnism, it's because I spent so many early years trying to raise money to fund my business and keep it going. And I just had to learn to kind of ask everyone for money, like shake
Yep.
every tree. And then, by the way, it reappeared pre-IPO. We had to kind of raise money again to bridge to the IPO. And I had to go out there again and shake every tree and, you know, expand my network, utilize my network. And here you are flipping it on its head, talking about shaking every tree for people, which I've also experienced. I had never thought of it through that lens. So I appreciate you taking it there. And I love this example you give. In fact, we should pick it apart because there's so many great learnings from that one experience, at least as I view it. So this person still works with you, you said, or
No, they did.
was a great employee?
I think he's an investment banker now. He's
Good for him.
went on to do bigger and better things
Yeah.
in the city, but he was a college kid, and he worked for me for 3 years, traveled around to different branches of my company, ran crews, and from Boston to DC to Ithaca, New York. So just a phenomenal hire. And I think the lesson for me is just to really kind of be the lion on the rock, hunting at all times. You're not always sprinting after a gazelle, but you're always just aware of somebody who might be special, an opportunity. You're under the tree waiting to see what could come out. And I think it's been some of the most talented people in my career that I've found that were able to add the most value to my company were some of these folks that I spotted in other areas of life. Like, we hired a teacher who's now, one of the leaders at my property management company. She turns out if you can manage 35-year-olds, you can definitely manage 35-year-olds. So it's a lot of skills transfer.
Well, it comes down to first principles, and, great people are great people. And so let's break this down. I love from the point of view of this person. What was his name at Walmart? Or
Will,
give me a first name.
Will,
What
yeah,
that?
Will,
Will?
yeah.
Okay, so I love that this guy Will, first of all, was just hustling. And sometimes I'll get people through DMs on social media or I don't know, out in life looking for advice. And I even included this bit in my book, Let Me Save You 25 Years, the book, where I just say, just be awesome. And I know that sounds so dumb. It
Mhm.
sounds so trite. But here you have Will being awesome at Walmart. Had obviously he wasn't doing it so he would somehow be recruited by an entrepreneur looking to up level him, but that was the outcome. And that's the lesson for life. And it may not have happened that day. It may not have happened that week. Therefore, you have to commit to being awesome for days and weeks and months and years at a time. But if you're willing to do that, the universe has a funny way of up leveling you, but you have to be willing to be awesome kind of all the time.
I
And yeah.
I think 90%. Well, maybe that's a little high. I'll ask you the percent, but I think a very high percent of human beings, unfortunately, go through life in defense mode. They're just waiting to see what comes at them. They're reacting, and when they're at a job, they're doing as little as humanly possible to not get fired and to get paid next Friday. So if you can kind of flip that on its head, and Will did not own Walmart. Will was not going to get a raise if there were carts out front when that basketball game got out. Will was out in 25-degree wet, nasty weather in Ithaca, New York when this happened. But he cared. He was just getting after it. And so few people do that. So I think that's just one massive way to set yourself apart from almost everybody in the world.
Well, and here you are, like you say, with your eyes open, always looking for talent, shaking every tree, being willing to put your card out there. And I love the message of even how you did it tactically, right? Hey, if you know someone like that really takes the edge off, kind of like the griminess, the weirdness off of trying to poach someone, making them uncomfortable. You're putting them in a position where they can both be flattered by your observation of their hustle, as well as not weirded out by your trying to like steal them or feeling bad about that. Like that's a really brilliant tactic, right? Where did you kind of get that idea versus the more direct approach? Hey, if you ever want a job, come,
Yeah,
give me a call.
I don't know. I think it was the natural salesperson in me of kind of trying to take the pressure off a little bit. But I realized very early in my entrepreneurial journey that 10% of people are in career nirvana. They're not going to apply for your job. They're not going to come to you. They have the perfect opportunity. Even if you convince them that there's something better, they're not going to leave. Like 10% of people are perfectly happy in their job.
Yeah.
Another 10% of people at the bottom are actively looking. They are very unhappy in their job. They're going to be the ones who apply to your jobs on Indeed, LinkedIn, wherever. And then 80% of humans are somewhere in the middle. They are not quite perfectly happy, but they are happy. They got a boss who really likes them. They're good at what they do. That 80% is where you're going to find your high performers. So you have to go find them. So I realized quick that they weren't going to come on, Craigslist. I was running Craigslist ads for employment back then. It doesn't exist anymore. But it's got to go hunt the talent. And I've been doing that my whole career.
Yeah. I would also say that this same tactic is a brilliant tactic, even in the realm of raising money. Hey, hitting up your, let's say, rich friends, acquaintances, people with money, people with investable money. These are people who you may not want to offend, may not want to, solicit in that way. But, a great tactic is rather than solicit them for an investment, solicit them for great advice. Hey, I want to show you this opportunity that this company I'm building, or this company my friend is building. I've raised money for other people, where it's just like, hey, I really want to get your eyes on their presentation, get your feedback, tell me what you think. And of course, like clockwork, people that are happy to give you advice may just be happy to invest in you, especially if the approach is less direct like that. I've had a lot of success utilizing that same approach, and it can be sincere. Like you genuinely want their feedback on your presentation, on your pitch, or just advice on where you might go to raise money. And along the way, they might see what you hope they might see and say, hey, what about me?
Yep.
Just like this Will reached out to you and said, hey, what about me for this job?
Yeah, I think the people are investing a lot more in the operator and the person than you realize. So they want to know what kind of questions you ask. They want to know how you think. They want to know if you're open to advice, if you're, you know, uh, adaptable, and approaching that way kind of gives them a look into your mind and how you think about the problems. And through a discussion, while they might be giving you honest advice about your business, they also, the entire time, they're thinking if there's an opportunity there for them to invest.
Exactly. Let's talk about that for a second. In terms of investing, being on the investor side or being on the raising money side, this idea of being committed to an idea, seen as like the will not bend, will not break entrepreneur on the one hand. On the other hand, I'm flexible, I'm coachable, I'm reasonable. How do you reconcile that? Because I think that it's hard for people sometimes, entrepreneurs, founders, people, trying to build their own sweaty startup, trying to go out there, raise money, trying to even just raise support, other people to join them. How do you reconcile being that headstrong, confident founder versus being flexible, coachable, reasonable?
I think that is the toughest balance in business, because you cannot be a successful entrepreneur unless you have irrational confidence. You cannot
Okay,
win.
hold on. Say that again.
You cannot be a successful entrepreneur unless you have some degree of irrational confidence, meaning you think
Right.
things are going to be easier than they are. You think that you can do it. You have to be crazy to start a business. You really do. The odds are against you. Your competitors have an advantage in almost every single way. We could talk about all that, but you have to be irrationally confident. Like I know
Yeah.
I know a ton of people, and so do you, who have been massively successful in their lives and careers simply because they're not insecure.
Yeah.
So that's one side of it. But then the other side of it is I have on the mirror above my sink where I brush my teeth, I have a little piece of paper taped to the wall with a couple words on it. It says change your mind often. Because if you tell the smart people around you who disagree with you that they're wrong, and you disregard their opinions, and you see new information, you have new information coming in that changes things for you, and you disregard that, I don't know anybody who can win with that mindset, no matter how good they are, how smart they are. You cannot will something into existence when logic is pointing you in a different direction. So I'm talking out of both sides of my mouth here. I'm saying you need irrational confidence, but you also need the humility to change your mind. I don't know where you stand on that, but I think it's a unique balance.
Absolutely. I think that we can all imagine examples in our lives or even from TV of both of these extremes. Humans that are just irrationally confident. They're locked on a vision. They will not relent. They will not bend. They will not break. They will not compromise. And that's celebrated in media because it's a fantastic story. And often it is the case. But I submit to anyone that's observed that, in examples like Steve Jobs, who just, would not relent on certain details and things like that. If you get close to the story, you'll often find out it was more nuanced than that.
Yeah.
It's fun to tell an extreme story, and even if those extremes are true, uh, by instance, they won't be true in the broader scheme of things. As an example, Steve Jobs didn't build the iPhone, right? Like it was built by literally hundreds of people who had a hand in the programming and circuitry and sourcing and everything else. But of course, we can perceive it more simply as, oh, Steve Jobs had this vision and he wouldn't compromise. And I'm not trying to pick on Steve Jobs. It's just that all of these absolutes are always more nuanced. And so
Yep.
this idea that a entrepreneur doesn't have to be an entrepreneur, a leader in any capacity has to be headstrong, confident, um, uncompromising when it comes to like the vision and the outcome is absolutely tempered by a certain degree of humility, a willingness to listen, a willingness to change one's mind. And I agree with you. the leader that refuses to do so, even because of, let's say, bad examples that they might have seen in media, will ultimately fail because they will lose the confidence of those around them. They'll be intolerable. Now, the tricky part is, and this is again why I'm always trying to preach, this is why you're paid the big bucks, either metaphorically or literally, right? You're the CEO of your own life. You have to make the hard decisions, and they're hard because there is no right answer. There are times when you have to be unwilling to compromise, and there are times where you have to swallow your own pride and hear someone else's idea that turns out to be better than yours, or whatever the case may be. And the judgment to choose which to do when is why you're paid the big bucks.
Yep. I've been in a meeting with a leader of one of my companies who has a big idea or something they want to change, and I've held strong and told them, no, this is not a good idea. We have to focus. We have to keep this simple. I think you're wrong, and I'm willing to stand beside that. Always in a respectful way. It does drive me nuts how these business movies and shows show asshole leaders who have this weird aura and power, because that's not how any successful operator that I know operates. But then on the other side, I had my head of finance in the self-storage business went on vacation for 2 weeks. And while he was gone, this was 2022, I had 2 offers accepted on buildings that I made the offer price on. He gets back from vacation and he's digging into the underwriting. He's like, Nick, we need to talk. These offers were signed and we have big brokers that are working with us, and now our name is on the line, but we got to drop these contracts. Like we cannot afford to pay what you said we can afford to pay. And I was like, holy cow. And this was in a team meeting where he told the big boss, me, the owner of the company, in front of 3 or 4 other people, that, Nick, I disagree with this. Like, we can't pay this. We need to drop these contracts. This is risky for the company. And he gave these reasons. And I listened. I said, okay, I'll do it. I'll call the broker. I'll say, hey, look, we had a miscommunication. We cannot pay this much. I know our reputation is at stake, but I fucked up. It saved our business, because interest rates from 2022 to 2025 tripled or doubled. It went from 3.5% to 7%. And those deals would have been very stressful for us if we would have bought them at the price that I wanted to buy them at. And me listening to my head of sales and having the humility to say, oh shit, how's wrong here? Saved us a lot of headache in the future.
Wow. That's a powerful example. I appreciate you sharing. I think it's a perfect and real example of how real boardrooms and business decisions work. And I think that we have to be very careful as participants, whether we're business leaders or whether we're even just, part of an organization, to resist the allure of the storytelling that happens in business
Media.
movies, let's say, media, TV shows, because it's way more complex. Like my wife and I used to watch Suits. We loved the series Suits, and it's just a fun, like, kind of silly, mindless show. But it was always so laughable to me how, in the morning they had some contract dispute worth, $16 million or $160 million or whatever. And like by lunch, they're up in arms, and by dinner, it's like all settled. And it's like just the email chain would have taken longer to unpack than, this one day of events that somehow got papered and contracted and signed. Just the paperwork for those kind of deals can take weeks.
It's the hard part of what I do. And even writing this book, business, like, I can tell the story from my point of view, but Shawn, if you read my book, you're going to disagree with, 20 of my 60 points that I make in this book, because the way business happens for everybody is different. Right. So it's very, very hard to have steadfast rules, to have mental models that you follow every single time. Because, man, literally 12 months can change everything in a market, in an opportunity with a business. So it's when you're digesting this media, do so with a grain of salt, for sure.
Yeah. I mean, many of my Shawnisms in my book are in themselves sort of oxymorons, right? I'm always talking about top ambition with infinite patience. People have a hard time reconciling patience with ambition. The willingness to be uh, totally stubborn, right? It's like I talk about stubbornness with confident humility,
Yep.
and it's exactly this topic we're breaking down here, and that's the tricky part. And again, that's why being a leader is so difficult, is because you're balancing not just diverging principles, but often opposing principles, and somehow you're flip flopping from one to the next depending on the constraints of the conversation at hand, or the decision that needs to be made. What's an example from your book? So you've written this book, Sweaty Startup, which has been your mantra on social media, by the way. It's fantastic. I think it's some kind of cousin, it feels like, already, to my book and to my mantras, which of course, these are true principles. But tell us a little bit about the Sweaty Startup and what it represents.
It's a call out on entrepreneurship culture, because entrepreneurship culture, if you walked up to somebody in New York City or in Utah and California, Georgia, wherever, and on the street and said, what does entrepreneurship mean to you? They're going to talk about Silicon Valley. They're going to talk about Steve Jobs. They're going to talk about Shark Tank. They're going to talk about new ideas. They're going to talk about an invention. That's where every single bit of media in the entrepreneurial world points you. But the people in my life and in your life who have gotten wealthy, I'm talking like big beach houses, private airplanes, nice golf clubs, good restaurants, whatever, or just time. They have time to do what they want to do, like that level of wealth. It is almost always the result of doing common things uncommonly well and starting a business where competition exists, but you can carve out a piece of the pie, where your idea is part of it, but execution is 10 times more important. So in the book, I talk about how to pick opportunities, why to pick opportunities, how to pick opportunities with weak competition so your odds of success can increase, and then all the skills required, the hiring, the delegation, the sales, the tactical things about running a company to get your advantage, because it's not your idea that's going to give you the advantage.
I love this. I love this. And this is back to my comment at the very top of this podcast, where I'm always jealous of other entrepreneurs and other business leaders. Cause and again, nothing's easy. I make jest of it, but Lovesac is actually a terrible example for people, because we got incredibly lucky. And it also was just a crazy series of events, as I say, as my subtitle of my book, right? Mistakes, miracles, and of course the lessons that got us here. But your approach in the Sweaty Startup is much more relevant to more people, which is why I love having you on the podcast, because it's much more likely that you can take Nick's construct and what you're arguing for in the Sweaty Startup around taking much more reasonable and well-known paths to business and to industry, and competing in straightforward ways. And just like your example of Will at Walmart, so much of what you're doing is just the macro version of that, right? Where you're being awesome at a Walmart job, and look where it's led you, into millions and millions in prosperity, the opportunity to now you're invested, I think, in, I don't know, a dozen different businesses simultaneously. Here I am, still pretty much focused on the business I started when I was 18 years old. And we're playing two vastly different games, in the sense, like, I've actually made it my mantra, Nick. We talk about how to keep ourselves focused on track, and I get tempted all the time. Hey, how about on the side? I don't know, go run my parents did apartments growing up, go purchase some real estate. And it would be wise of me to do some of these things. It would be wise of me to diversify and have some franchise portfolio on the side of, I don't know, some little restaurant chain, something like that. But I've actually refused to do it, because I've taken a different path, and I've committed. I've kind of all in, both feet, both hands, up to my eyeballs, trying to build the most loved brand in the world. I'm trying to build a Nike out of Lovesac, which I'm sure sounds ridiculous to those listening, but I think we're on the way. honestly, and talk more about that later. But I love this because you and I are kind of, and it's not that I'm even remotely uh, recommending this to other people, because I find myself in a unique situation 26 years in, and I've planted an oak tree that's 26 years old. So thankfully, I have this oak tree that's standing. But if I were starting today, I would highly recommend people read your book, people follow your example, and it's really, I think, a more reliable way to achieve, $1 million outcomes. Let's just say it that way. If you're interested.
I think the way that people think about entrepreneurship today is they're in a valley and opportunities are mountains to climb, right? And a
Mhm.
lot of this culture around entrepreneurship is the gladiator. I'm Russell Crowe. I'm in the arena against all odds. I'm going
Yeah.
or the sports movie, or the in any kind of against all odds story. I'm going to look up at the highest, tallest mountain, the most treacherous, the most ice at the top, and I'm going to try to climb that. And at the top is $1 billion revenue company. That's
Yeah.
real. Like, that can happen. The outcomes can be massive. But the sweaty startup, my book, my entire mantra is, let's flip that around. We are at the
Mhm.
top of the tallest mountain right now, and we have a water hose. And we turn on that water hose, and the water is going to take the path of least resistance to get to the bottom. That's the way we should be as entrepreneurs. Let's set a very reasonable goal, 10, 20, $30,000 a month of what we want to accomplish with entrepreneurship. And then let's take the path of least resistance to get there, and let's pick our competition. Entrepreneurship is not an Olympic gymnastics routine where we get paid more money doing hard things. Warren Buffett says you can get paid really well for jumping over 1 foot bars over and over again in business. So I'm all about picking your competition. There's a part of my book the editor wanted to take out where I say, you have a choice here. You can compete against, you're playing basketball, and the winner makes money. It's either $1 billion if you beat LeBron James, or it's $30,000 a month for the rest of your life if you beat a fifth grade girl. What game do you want to play? Do you want to play against LeBron James for the chance of $1 billion, or do you want to play against the fifth grade girl for the chance of an amazing life? I'm trying to get people to play against that girl.
That's awesome. And yeah, in fairness, there are a lot of fifth graders playing business. It's amazing, actually. You wouldn't know sometimes as a customer until you have a bad experience. But whether it be a storage business, or whether it be, a rental business, or I don't know, just one of these businesses that you're surrounded with on a daily basis, you drive down the street. It's shocking to think, and this is one of my Shawnisms, right? If it can be done, why not me? Right? If it has been done, it can be done. And why not me? So, you look at some business that may not be even that glossy or impressive, but someone is behind that running it, and maybe even running it poorly, and still making money. I mean, you've seen them on the street for 5, 10
Hey,
years.
me and my partner were sitting in a bar in Ithaca, New York, complaining about our lives in early 2014, and we're like, man, we are never going to be able to take Storage Squad doing pickup and delivery storage to 20 million a year of revenue. There's not enough schools. We had just went to a couple new markets. We'd gotten our teeth kicked in. We realized that, okay, we can do really well at super high end, super private, hard to get into schools. We cannot do well at state schools. We cannot do well at small schools.
Hmm.
But we got to find a new business to get wealthy. Where are the dumb people making money? Where are people who are playing golf and are not answering the phones and are not operating their companies well? Where are they making money? It didn't take long to figure out that real estate was that location.
But by the way, that comes at a cost, right? Because that means, at least for a sweaty decade or so, you're not playing golf and you're answering the phone.
Yep. I rented the first 400 storage units at my storage facility myself on the phones.
That's awesome. I mean, I, you know, worked 9 to 9 at Lovesac stores for the first few years. And I was running around hiring, trying to find wills, as you describe, along the way to take my place in store X while I went and opened store Y and Z in Southern California and tried to replace myself there. And so we all, follow this same journey, and mine has led me to now the icy, steep, rocky peaks of, $1 billion opportunity, which continues to scare the crap out of me. But I've chosen my mountain to climb. And that's not the mountain I started with. I thought I thought I was going to build a little beanbag business. I thought it was going to grow into a few million. It was on its way there. It got there quite handily, in fact, in the early 2000s. I thought I'd sell that, move on, do the next thing. I was Richard Branson's, protege, having won his TV show. And here I am now, 26 years in, having walked a very different path, having experienced all kinds of ups and downs along the way that's led me here. And so, like water around a rock, we sometimes get carried by these rivers that we set in motion. And here I am in a very different scenario than you. But the coolest thing is, is that both of us have learned many of the same lessons through our journeys, and have those opportunities to share it, in my book, in your book, on this podcast. So, what's another favorite lesson that you learned the hard way along the way that you get to call out in this sweaty startup that you've written?
I think some of the most important skills in business cannot be gained through textbooks or reading or podcasts or YouTube or books. You have to work out and you have to build the muscle. Sales, hiring, delegation, decision making. Gosh, we're making 1,000 decisions a year, where 300 of them are very, very important decisions. We're never taught how to do this stuff, ever. The only way to do it is to get out and practice. So the people who go big very early and who try very high stakes games, raise the money, do all this stuff fast, man, it will break you because you just don't have the experience yet. So, man, the question I wanted to ask you is, what percentage of your time over the years, or kind of, if you look back at the high leverage decisions, the ones that were really important that helped you grow, what percentage of that revolved around like chasing talent and hiring and building the team?
I would characterize it this way. At this point in my existence as a leader, as a CEO of a public company that's, approaching $1 billion in sales, all that, it's only about people. It's only about talent. It's the only thing that matters. There is very little that I can do individually to really change the outcome of this thing. Of course, look, there are some, I feel really lucky to be involved in the product, and I'm an inventor and I'm a designer, and those things can matter. But I can also tell you that whatever I've contributed, and I think I've contributed a lot in that realm, just as much or more has been contributed by all the amazing designers and engineers that we've brought on and hired and amassed and afforded because of our scale here at Lovesac. On the other hand, when it comes to all the other aspects of the business, I'm the weakest tool in the shed. Everyone around me is a stone cold pro, coming from the best companies with the best backgrounds, whether it be in marketing or people or whatever. And of course, I get the luxury of learning from all them. So the strange thing is, my employees, if you want to call them that, are mentors to me.
Yep.
But I continue to be willing to learn from them, and I'm paying attention, and I'm not just golfing. I'm in the mix, but I'm deferring to them. And occasionally, there are bits of wisdom, I guess, that come with time and decision making where, I can really make a difference. But the biggest difference I made was getting them here. And by the way, creating a culture and a company where they want to stay, because they have all kinds of choices, from their compensation pay package to just the everyday goings on around here and the vibe of it. If you can't hang on to great talent, what good is finding great talent?
It's unbelievable that a business journey, and I say it's so much about momentum, right? It's about getting that snowball rolling down the hill. But in the very early days, I was chasing a $5 an hour call center person to help me with the phones, or a virtual assistant, and I was chasing Will in the parking lot of a Walmart. And now at your scale, you're still doing the same thing, except you have executive search firms and you're getting on planes to go chase talent. It's always the same, though, of building and bringing in people, because that's the ultimate form of leverage, is people. And if you can lead and you can encourage and you can relate, then amazing things happen.
Look, if Lovesac becomes everything that I think it can and believe it should, cool. And there's just as much chance that in your professed boring businesses, you'll make more money than I will. You'll have less of a risk profile than I will. You'll have more fun than I will. Who knows? Who cares? The point is that wherever your journey takes you, you kind of just got to roll with it. I didn't mean for Lovesac to kind of get me here. I have made the conscious decision to commit 100% to it.
Yeah.
I turn down investment opportunities and sort of distractions all the time because it's just, and I'm not saying it's right. I'm just saying that's the decision I've made, but I'm conscious of it. It's not an accident.
I think it's right.
And I really,
I think
what's that?
I think it's right. Look, I have a holding company. I have more than one business. It's all fun. It sounds great. But 9 out of 10 of the most successful people that I know focused on one thing. And they did that one thing very well. So there's something to be said for taking that one big bet. And I love the mindset of, hey, I'm going to say no to almost everything.
Yeah.
Almost everything. It's either hell yes or it's no, I'm sorry. I got other priorities.
Yeah. In fact, I've narrowed it down for me pretty much to Lovesac and my family, right? All my personal stuff, my religion, my family, because there is only so much time in life. And it's really tough. In fact, even a lot of business things I say no to, networking and things that arguably could be great for Lovesac. So I say yes to some and no to others because they get in the way of me being around on the day my daughter goes to prom. And I want to be there for her pictures, even though she'll do fine without me around, so we make these decisions and we're paid the big bucks to make the hard decisions. And whether our personal life or our business life, there is no right answer, but we're constantly just using our best judgment. So as you've gotten involved in all these different things and had the opportunity to build so many sweaty startups, what is the single biggest change you think in your judgment, in your ability to leverage wisdom? Is there anything you can point out? Or
and I think it's perfectly in line with what I've heard you say a few times in this interview, which is this is why they pay me the big bucks. This is why they pay us the big bucks. I say this to my team all the time because as you operate a business and as it gets larger and more opportunity, and you're at much larger scale than I am, let me be clear, it just gets more stressful and more uncomfortable. And I'm constantly telling my team and myself, like looking at myself in the mirror and kind of preaching to myself, like this is why they pay us the big bucks. Like this is why the reward is here. This is why this is a great opportunity for me, because it just gets more and more uncomfortable. And I think the ability to deal with the uncomfort, the ability to deal with the stress is a muscle that you build over time. And the more uncomfort you can handle, the more money you stand to make, frankly, in this world. So there are people who, if they got a flat tire on the way home from the grocery store, it would ruin their week. They would have a panic attack. They would call their mother. They would cry, whatever it would be. And then there are people who would get a flat tire on the way home from the grocery store and they would forget to tell their spouse about it at dinner because it's a non-issue. And I think it's all about uncomfort tolerance is the key to a lot of things in life. It's frankly not just business.
Yeah, I love that. One of the key sources of discomfort that I call out in my own book that I talk about a lot is uncertainty, and how entrepreneurs have this unique ability to cope with uncertainty that I think we take for granted because it's just natural to us, or it's been forced upon us and we've developed that capacity. And it's a weird thing to talk about because it's not really talked about a lot. But uncertainty, people would almost rather know they have cancer, as a crazy example, than live waiting for the test results for another month, right? Like we have a hard time functioning with uncertainty around us. And so the ability to develop that in yourself, the ability to develop the ability to cope with discomfort, as you say, and uncertainty, all these things, if you have the ambition to be not just an entrepreneur, but a leader, then I think developing that in yourself is key. Is there anything that you do besides just live and grow in business to develop your capacity to cope with uncertainty or discomfort?
Yeah, it's the constant ambition and drive to grow that I can't satiate. I don't know how I maybe I need to go to California and do ayahuasca at some point in my career because I just keep on biting off more and more. If I'm sitting and staying the same and just waiting, I'm uncomfortable. I want to feel alive. I want to feel productive. I want to feel like I have things balls in the air that I'm not sure how they're going to land. I love that feeling, and that's what I love about business. Um, so yeah, it's been a journey for sure, but I do find myself taking on more than I should.
And for entrepreneurs getting started that don't have the means sometimes to live up to their ambitions the way they want to, they have to go raise money. I face that. That's really where this Shawnism comes from. Shake every tree. You it sounds like in your early days of real estate, you had a lot of experience fundraising. Any other thoughts about and advice for people on how they can get into the mindset of being willing and humble enough to shake every tree, be bold enough to ask friends and loved ones, sometimes acquaintances, people they don't know, perfect strangers, for money to grow or for resource to help get you from A to B?
I think the something to understand about raising money is that if you don't have any access to capital, the capital calls all the shots. If you have one person who has the money and you need it, they control everything. So it's much better. Maybe I can give a pitch on why they should bootstrap instead of raise money, because
Yeah.
I think your first business, whether you're cleaning something, moving something, repairing something, any of those things, should be about building these skills that we've been discussing this entire episode: the network, the capital, the ability to delegate, the ability to hire. You need these things to do well at business. It's very hard to do business from a state of cash distress. Without money, business is really on hard mode. So I love finding a way to get to $5,000 a month of revenue, a profit to yourself, and then 10 grand. And then once you're at 15, 20 grand a month of revenue or income to yourself, not top line revenue, your world opens up and freedom happens. And all of a sudden you don't necessarily have to go raise money from somebody who's going to, take an unreasonable amount of equity in your business or something along those lines. So the great thing about my sweaty startup approach is that almost all the most visited page on my website is a list of 200 plus business ideas. Almost all of them can be bootstrapped. There's some level of investment for some of them, but go trade your time. I like going to trade your time for money first. I think that's a great way to approach it.
I love that. And if I think back about the earliest days of Lovesac, when it truly was a sweaty startup, I was not shaking trees for money. I was shaking trees for help.
Yeah.
And I was willing to ask every friend I had to just like, hey, if you're bored on Friday, I'm going to be stuffing sacks. You're welcome to come. I got some deliveries to be made. And soon enough, I had friends manning, the latest car show for me on a 10 by 10 booth on a Saturday because, I had to be somewhere else. And then I had friends making a delivery here and there. And I really am grateful to them for their contributions in the earliest days. And so, and eventually, of course, some of them became my partners, and one of them is still around today as our head of product, Dave. Just because I was willing to ask, I just needed help. So, I think it's important. One of the things I like to remind people looking for help is that you have the opportunity. At the end of the day, I never tried to compel my friends to come stuff sacks with me, but I did kind of throw it out there. And for some of them, it really became a path to a career. It became, the later days of Lovesac's early days were a lot of fun as we did grow the business into the millions, and a lot of us got to participate in that. And it's because I had the opportunity, and my mind was the same when I went to raise actual funds because I needed funds to grow my business. I wasn't begging for money. I had this thing that was going to double and triple your investment if you wanted to take a risk on this. And that's the attitude, that's that confidence, that irrational confidence that you talked about, that you have to have as an entrepreneur, being willing to shake every tree, ask for help, ask for money, and do it without blinking. And to this day and age, even though I turn down a lot of people who DM me and ask for private time and coaching or even investment, I still respect them. I still respond to them because I'm very, respectful of people who are willing to shake every tree.
Yep. I love it. I love it.
All right. Well, what's the one piece of advice as we wrap up you could give to anyone out there that might just save them a chunk off their own 25-year journey? I know, I agree with you. A lot of it you got to go learn yourself.
Yeah, I think close the computer. Try to stop getting engulfed in entrepreneurship culture as it stands on social media, on podcasts, on Silicon Valley, raise the money, change the world, new product, new idea. Go out and trade your time for money. Start really small. Take a dose of humility. Go out and do something that people don't think is sexy or fun, that you don't think is sexy or fun, and chase an opportunity. And if you do that and you pick the right thing and you just put one foot in front of the other and make the best decision that you can for 5 years, it's almost impossible that good things don't happen to you.
I love it. This is down to earth, useful advice from Nick Huber, the author of The Sweaty Startup. So good. Check him out on Instagram. Follow him as I do at Sweaty Startup. And be sure to definitely pre-order a copy of Nick's brand new book, as I have, The Sweaty Startup, How to Get Rich Doing Boring Things. This is not advice you're going to find everywhere.
People won't agree with all of it. I think again, it's nuanced. I'm just a guy, but I think people will take something away that'll make them better at making money. So that's my goal.
No, I'm actually, I feel like I'm almost rather have my kids read your book than my book. It releases next week, April 29th. Thank you so much to the determined decathlete. This guy was like a college superhero, the starter of Storage Squad in college like I was, the witness of will at Walmart, the sweaty startup man himself, Mr. Nick Huber. Thank you.
Shawn, thanks for giving me the platform. And I love your drive and your message that you're spreading as well, man. Keep up the great work.
Heck yeah. And remember, to all those listeners, whether it's life or work, business, entrepreneurship, it's important to shake every tree because you never know who or what might just fall into your lap and make a huge difference over the long term. It might just save you a chunk off your own 25 years journey. Thank you.
Once a year to take my friends away. It should not be the budget for your bike across America.
TikTok has become an aggregator for some of the dumbest human actions.
When I won that million, I was $2 million in debt, barely hanging on.